On this hot day, it's Thompson and Espinoza on KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. We're getting into this topic about, we're talking about domestic violence because it's so much in the news.
Yeah, but Ray Rice has really, ignited that conversation. And to be honest, to be fair about domestic violence, we've got to talk about women who hit men. There's so much shame involved, and, a man, God forbid if he said he was being beat up by his woman, he's looked upon as being weak. But again, I also think it's that conversation where if you talk about domestic violence, we have to include everybody. There probably, if you did the math, there are more women who hit men, obviously not as strong, not in the same way that what we saw with the video released by TMZ with, Ray Rice.
Although, Elizabeth, they talk about that video, and I heard from more people. She spit on him. I really was amazed at how much I heard about it. But obviously, he doesn't feel threatened in any way. He can't feel a physical threat. Ray Rice didn't feel threatened, but there are guys who do feel threatened. Anyway, we're going to take your calls at the bottom of the hour, but you may want to jump on a phone now because we'll talk more about just this issue of maybe you've had personal experience with it, of women being the abuser in an abusive relationship.
Yeah, is this you? Are you a guy listening thinking, yes, I am abused in my relationship? Is this you? You're the woman, and you are a little bit of a bully. So let's talk to founder and publisher of shrinkformen.com. She helps men, yes, you men who are in abusive relationships. Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. Dr. Tara Palmatier, is that right?
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we've got all kinds of data, and I think when you talk about men being in an abusive relationship, people think, well, it doesn't happen as often. How bad is it?
If you look at peer-reviewed research, you will find that men and women perpetrate domestic violence at nearly equal rates. Additionally, in most domestic violence relationships where there is physical violence going on, not just emotional, more often than not, it's mutual, meaning both partners are violent, and in those cases, the woman typically initiates the violence. Now, women sustain higher injury rates. That has to do with physical size, but typically they will initiate the violence in a relationship where the violence is mutual.
Is that out of frustration? I hate to naturally take the women's side on this, but I really do because men in general were so much stronger than you guys. I just feel, but provoked, you could say that gets the whole cycle of violence started.
So wait a minute, you're saying women act violent because it's something that the men did to them?
Out of a frustration with the relationship. I don't know. In other words,
I'm sorry, but even if that's true, that doesn't excuse violence. Go to therapy. Talk about it. You don't put your hands on another person, and what you just did there is blaming the victim.
No, I was simply trying to understand it. I wasn't blaming anybody.
She's going to spank you, I think.
I like the therapist comes right after me. This is the therapy that I needed, doctor. I needed a therapist like you. Get right. What are you saying, pal? Are you saying that? No, but I really was just trying to understand the frustration that might have led to it. I'm not justifying.
Sure. Well, look, domestic violence is not a gender issue. Okay, it's something that is often modeled in the abusive person's family of origin. So they witnessed emotional and physical violence happening between mom and dad, and they have adopted that as to how they're going to deal with frustration and conflict.
But let me ask you this, doctor, because men are supposed to, in society, right, societal norms, they are the stronger, they should be head of household. But what happens if you are a man and you are head of household, but you are being abused by your wife? How do you reach out for help? Who do you go to?
Well, that's very difficult because I believe in the United States there is only one shelter that will accommodate male victims of domestic violence and their children. I believe that's in San Diego. The mental health field does a pretty poor job of it. When I was doing my graduate training, my professors didn't talk about female-perpetrated violence with the caveat that if a woman was violent, it was in self-defense, which is utter nonsense. Sometimes, sure it is, but it's not the case in most scenarios. If you go to the police are now trained to view men as the primary aggressors. So your wife could have just hit you. You can be standing there with blood running down your face, and you might get cuffed. and taken to the police station. So it's very difficult. There aren't many resources for men in these kinds of relationships. And I think, no offense, the media does a really bad job. You guys jump on the outrage train about violence against women and don't address these issues, or worse yet, you let feminists control the discourse.
Well, this is why we have you on, though, because we want to have a very honest conversation. I need to ask you, why do you believe that women think it's okay to hit a man?
Well, I don't know if what you learned as a child, but I can remember being a kid and hearing, boys should never, ever hit girls. Men should never hit women. I don't remember getting the opposite message, that girls and women shouldn't hit men. If you look at the media, or a sitcom, the girlfriend, her boyfriend says something she doesn't like or something she thinks is stupid, and she slaps him, and you hear a laugh track. If you look at commercials, men are portrayed as these bumbling idiots who couldn't put their pants on if they didn't have a girlfriend or a wife to help them. So we live in a culture where men are portrayed as idiots and punching bags.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to talking. We're going to maybe talk to you. We can keep you over the break if possible. But I have to say that maybe this is just because I've seen and we saw in that video and we've seen, and as if it's just one big clever, I don't want to say clever like it was some premeditated thing, but a marketing thing or triumph of, as you say, media, just the damage done when these men put a beat down on women. It's so horrifying. I'm afraid I'm having trouble getting my head to a place that's super sympathetic to men. I see psychological domination from women much more than I do physical.
Actually, women excel in that. Women engage in relational abuse, emotional aggression at higher rates than men do.
And that's why, Doctor, I want you to stay with us, please, because we should go into the 10 signs that you are in an abusive relationship. You have to be able to identify it. So thank you, Dr. Tara Palmatier was going to stay with us and give us those 10 signs. Are really important. Thompson and Espinosa Show, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Thompson and Espinosa Show. I'm Elizabeth Espinosa. Mark Thompson is here, and it is certainly very hot outside. Thank you for your tweets. We keep getting them from you at TNE KFI. Eric Zandor just sent us a note. He says visiting schools in Pasadena and took a picture of his little temperature there in the car. 109. 109. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very, very busy time for the temperature pics of the thermometer in the car to be sent back and forth. There are tons of those all over the internet in Southern California. It's like, you won't believe there's 113 in this parking lot.
Exactly. And you know what? This conversation is heating up as well, because we've been talking about the Ray Rice situation, which led to the domestic violence conversation. And we here at TNE really believe that to have a fair conversation, we have to talk about the fact that women hit men also. And that's not excusable. That's inexcusable. And so it's not fair. And, of course, again, the caveat always being a man can hurt a woman, much easier than the other way around. So no excuse, even if a woman hits you, for a man to hit a woman. But, ladies, let's not hit our men. So with us right now, founder and publisher of shrinkformen.com. She helps men. Yes, you men who are in abusive relationships. She helps you get rid of the shame, the embarrassment, and seek treatment and help. Dr. Tara Palmatier, thank you so much for sticking around with us. We wanted to go into the signs. What are the big signs that you are living an abusive relationship?
Sure. Well, the most obvious one is if there is physical violence. I don't care if it doesn't really hurt or you're stronger than her. If she's hitting you, slapping you, kicking, biting, scratching, throwing objects at you, it's physical violence. It's just as bad when a woman does it, and you need to get out.
I forgot about the throwing things. That equals the playing field a little bit. And when we're talking about abusive relationships, and right before the break I was saying I really see the balance of emotional domination and psychological domination going to the woman. In fact, I just think that's where women and abuse of men might come together, because the physical abuse I see dominated by men. But you talk a lot and on your website, and it would seem in your writings, about the psychological domination. I mean, the utter domination of the man by the woman oftentimes.
Yes, that can happen. But again, I want to correct you. Women and men commit physical violence in intimate relationships at the same rate.
Did the doctor not get the memo about not correcting me ever on my show?
Dr. Palmatier, I love her. Verbal attacks, gaslighting.
Yes. Gaslighting, isolating, destruction of property. I mean, if you go on YouTube and do a search for girlfriend smashes boyfriend's Xbox, and you'll find many videos where women are triumphantly doing that, breaking phones, computers, valued possessions, control freakery, gaslighting. Elizabeth, you just mentioned, that's where it's a term from an old film noir in which the abuser denies saying things, doing things. I've worked with men who have caught their wives because they've installed cameras in the home because they're trying to document the abuse, because they've been threatened by their wives with making false allegations to the police that they're actually being abused as a way to control. And they've caught their wives on film hiding their car keys. Ask the wife, wow, have you seen my car keys? No. You need to be more careful with your possessions. So and that's an example, that's a classic example of gaslighting.
That'll drive you crazy.
That is so clever. You know, I have to say, some of this stuff has happened in my relationships, and I never thought of it as abuse.
Mark, do you want to schedule an appointment with me after the show?
You don't have enough time on your calendar. I don't have enough money in the bank.
Okay.
And by the way, right after we're done with the doctor, we want to get your inputs. You can call us now at 800-5201-KFI, 800-5201-KFI, because we're going to fold our listeners into this. Mm-hmm. But you talk also about unreasonable expectations. I thought that was something that jumped out at me. Will you explain what that is exactly?
Sure. Unreasonable expectations. For example, oftentimes I work with many men whose wives refuse to work despite having multiple degrees and the children being in school full time, yet don't want to curb their spending. So men have to work even more hours than they would ordinarily, and then they get slammed for not being at home enough. It's like, well, if the wife won't work, somebody has to earn the money. Unreasonable expectations for access to email. I have a lot of clients whose wives demand passwords to email, Facebook, unreasonable expectations on behavior. I mean, you name it. Yet, and this is a telltale sign, if any listeners out there are wondering, does she hold herself to the same expectations and standards of behavior as she holds you? So double standards are often a sign that you are, at the very least, in an emotionally abusive relationship.
You know, one thing I've seen as well is when a partner isolates the other one, and it's so subtle, right?
Yes, it certainly can be. And it usually starts with, oh, your friends don't like me, your sister was rude to me. And isolation is a very, very successful tactic to gain control, because essentially what the abusive partner does is cuts her target off from his support system, from the people who love him and care about him and who will say, you know, man, the way she's treating you isn't okay. Why are you putting up with that?
You also, and this, I hate to say, once again, it rang true to me. You know, when you walk on eggshells in a relationship because you don't want to tick the other person off because their temper's so bad, or, oh, I don't want her angry at me. And there are a few things you point to, a few things in your list that seem to fall into that category of putting the other person on edge, so you're walking on eggshells. Like you talk about people react. One day this ticks her off, the next day it doesn't tick her off. Or one thing that she was cool with, all of a sudden.
You're talking about unpredictable responses. That's another indication that you might be in an abusive relationship. One day checking your phone messages while she's, I don't know, playing Candy Crush is okay. The next day it isn't. And also, you know, fellas, if you are having to go through a intricate series of mental gymnastics in your head for hours or days before you want to ask your wife or girlfriend, hey, is it okay if we make this purchase? Or I want to, you want to share your feelings with her about something, or you have something you want to talk about. If you have to figure out, if you're rehearsing over and over again because you're just trying to find the perfect way to say something so that you don't trigger a rage episode or pouting or some other kind of emotional abuse, that's a serious issue.
You're in trouble. You're in trouble. Wow.
You're in trouble.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think it's important not to be ashamed and to come out and speak out. So, again, founder and publisher of shrinkformen.com. We were going to link your website to our page, Dr. Tara Palmatier. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes,
I also want to
Doctor.
make one more announcement. I'm going to be launching a beta site for women in 2.5 weeks called crazybusters.com. And this is an offshoot of Shrink for Men. It's for the new wives and girlfriends of men who are still having to deal with an abusive, crazy ex.
There's a lot of that. That's a whole other hour, if not more.
Grief, that's a pandemic in and of itself. But it typically happens when there are shared children and the abusive ex is still trying to control and abuse her ex-husband, the father of the children, through the children, and it can be very stressful.
Yeah, talk
for
control,
the wives
control.
And girlfriends. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I've always wanted to say this to a psychologist, psychiatrist, person in the. That's all the time we have for today.
Thank
but
you. My
we hope
bill
to
will
talk
be
to you
in the
again.
mail, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark is ready for his session, just saying. We're going to take your calls, 1-800-5201-KFI. Let us know. What do you think?
You might be in an abusive relationship.
Yeah, no. And you know what's funny? I heard some things that I'm like, ooh, I think I may have experienced that in the past. Thompson and Espinosa Show, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Thompson and Espinosa Show. Mark Thompson and Elizabeth Espinosa on this broiler of a day.
It sure is. Hey, really quick, Mark, you know that today is Mexican Independence Day. So I just want to say happy Independence Day to all Mexicanos. It's not Cinco de Mayo. It's actually 16 de septiembre, which is the 16th of September.
17 de septiembre, por supuesto. ¿Por qué no?
Yes, claro que sí. That's why I saw that tequila bottle in your office. I'm impressed that you celebrate, too.
Well, you'll see it there every day. Every day is Mexican Independence Day to me.
I love it. Well, and speaking of independence, we're trying to make sure men have an independence that is free from violence. Because as we talk about Ray Rice and the domestic violence conversation, there's a double standard. Women should not be able to hit men either.
Well, and it's abuse. It's not just violence. I mean, a lot of it is domination, it's psychological violence. You know, Elizabeth, don't you think? I mean, the more you talk to the doctor, the more it was clear that these are psychological games that are played, and they can be just as abusive sometimes.
Oh, if not more, and that's what she talked about. We're going to take your call, so let's go to George. George, what do you think?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to say I love you guys' show.
Thank you.
I listen to it every day. And I've been in abusive relationships before as well, whether it's just psychological or physical. You know, I've been through both. And I believe, in my opinion, whether male or female, if they're being abusive, mainly like physical, the other person has the right to, fight back or defend themselves.
What if the person has overwhelming lethal type strength? I mean, that's what you were looking at with that Ray Rice video. And that's not isolated. Generally speaking, the man really has that kind of strength versus the woman he's involved with.
Well, if the person knows that they can't really win, then they should either find a way out or just call the authorities. If they know that they're going to be in this type of abusive relationship, or if it's ongoing, then they should either, speak out or seek help.
Well, they got to get out of it, George. I mean, there's no excuse, as you heard from the doctor, for physical violence coming from a man or coming from a woman. I mean, I think that should be the golden rule. Michael, what happened to you?
So such an important topic. I was a victim of domestic abuse. My wife clawed my face off one night. She was so angry with me, and I didn't know what to do about it. The next day we had a verbal altercation, and she called me a name, and I ended up slapping her face, didn't injure her. and I fell victim to a phone call to the police department and was taken off to jail. The reason I called is, yes, if the abuse is happening, if you're seeing things thrown, if you're being verbally abused, physically abused, get out before you fall victim to being violent yourself.
Wow, that's a powerful story. I have to commend you. Thank you for calling. And also
thank you for the opportunity.
I think you point out a very important thing, and that is that the system is gamed and weighted for women, probably because men are so overwhelmingly the more violent party. And I'm sorry that if the psychiatrist were here, she would correct me and say, no, I want to correct you again, that women initiate. I understand, but I'm just saying the end result at the hands of a man can oftentimes be what the system responds to. And that's what's happening here, right, Elizabeth?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's why when she calls the cops, he's arrested. They don't even want to hear the story before that.
Yeah, that's not fair, and I think that's bad policing as well. But, Michael, thank you. And are you out of that relationship? I think we lost Michael. Okay.
If there's no way the answer isn't yes.
I'm hoping so. But see, that's the thing. You'd be surprised when you are in an abusive relationship. It's not so much the bruises, it's the mental scars, right? The psychological handcuffs.
Right. I think that's a good point. I mean, it doesn't necessarily stand to reason just because you've been through to hell and back that the relationship would be over.
Yeah. Ronnie, let's go to Ronnie.
Hey, Ronnie, you're on KFI.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello? Hi. I want to, with the doctor, what she said and everything, it's totally true. Unfortunately for myself, it took for me to hit rock bottom before I realized it. I was in an abusive relationship for 5 years with my ex-wife, and I mean it went everything from ranged from psychological abuse to actual physical abuse, to the times where points where I'd actually be bleeding, and the neighbors would hear us arguing, the cops would come out, and I was the one who would end up going to jail. Mm. And I think a lot of it was because I wasn't educated. I felt I grew up in the South, so I grew up on traditional values, and I thought, hey, this is the woman for me. Whatever happens, this is between us, and I stick by her no matter what. And it took for me to actually go into jail. Fortunately for me, I'm a combat vet, so. When after I was able to go to like a veterans program in lieu of some of my jail time for these domestic violence cases, and I was actually there to actually able to meet up with therapists who actually helped me realize, hey, you're in an abusive relationship. And a lot of it, it was very hard for me to even want to, seek help from anybody because, let's be honest, no guy out there is going to admit, hey, man, I don't want to actually go home right now because my girl, is probably going to end up beating up on me or something if I say the wrong thing to her.
That's terrible, live on eggshells like that. But, I'm so proud of you for getting out of it. Thank you for sharing your story. That's
what a story. 5 years, though, the guy's in it, Elizabeth. I mean, my God.
But that's being strong, and that's being a man, manning up to, you know what? I'm in an abusive relationship. I see the signs.
Well, and the other thing,
jump.
As a guy, though, you feel like, it's my role to tough this out. I'm the guy. I mean, I understand very traditional roles leave you in a tough spot oftentimes. So it was a good conversation.
Yeah.